I know that we are short on time, so here we go without my long speeches. Please welcome Dr. Jill Stein.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Dorley. I think no one exemplifies the politics of courage more than Dorley Ramey. So thank you, Dorley, for leading the way. When I saw that picture of this school teacher grandmother, former candidate who had been pepper sprayed in the face as the symbol of the resistance to the police crackdown on Occupy, I said, oh my God, I hope someday I have the honor of meeting that woman. And I was so flabbergasted when she turned up at a campaign event in Seattle and identified herself as a former school teacher from Seattle, and I started putting two and two together, and wow. So, you know, I think Dorley is kind of an example of what's happening right now, that really powerful, visionary people like you right here in this room are coming out of the woodwork. And it's you and Dorley that have really brought us to this incredible historic moment that we're at right now, where democracy and justice are really rising up all around us, from the democracy revolutions in the Middle East to the Occupy protests around the country, to the coal train blockades in Washington, to the Keystone Pipeline blockades, and the eviction blockades to keep families in their homes, and the student strikes to stop tuition hikes from Quebec to California to Mexico, to the rallies for a nuclear-free future. And on the list goes. In so many ways, democracy and justice really are breaking out all around us. And as they are, people are breaking away from the establishment parties that have gotten us to this breaking point. And it's so exciting to be at an election time right now where people get focused and we start having conversations that we otherwise don't have with all kinds of people that we didn't know and we don't usually talk to, because we can actually put all those things together and make this election a really powerful tipping point to start taking back our democracy and the peaceful, just, green future that we deserve, and we deserve it now. And thank you all for making that happen. And we badly need a tipping point right now because we are at the breaking point. We're at the breaking point for people and the planet and our economy and our democracy. And what's exciting is that people are realizing we didn't get here just on account of one party, but we've gotten here really thanks to both wings of this political establishment, the Republican and the Democratic wings of that political establishment, that together have really delivered crisis after crisis. And as you may know, not all your friends may be quite up to speed on this. So I'm going to just run through the litany of how Barack Obama, in fact, has embraced the policies of George Bush and, in fact, gone beyond him in so many ways. And, you know, in this campaign, people ask me as a doctor, so what kind of medicine am I practicing now? And I say I'm practicing political medicine because it's the mother of all illnesses. And we've got to fix this one if we want to fix everything else that ails us. But it's actually all of us that need to be political therapists in this campaign, because so many of our friends and colleagues are stuck in an abusive relationship, an abusive political relationship, and sometimes it helps to run them through the reality check. And you know, one of the hallmarks of being in an abusive relationship is that you're making apologies for your abuser. Things like, oh, I know he really loves me in his heart. He didn't mean to take away my job and my home and my dignity and my creditworthiness and all that. And next year it's going to be better. And someone made him do it. It was the Republicans who made him do it. Or it was that addiction, not to alcohol in this case, it was just that addiction to money that made him do it. So anyhow, for our friends that are still stuck in abusive relationships, I'm going to run through the reality check quickly that you might be able to pass on to them and help them break up with that political abuser and get their lives back on track. So, to run through the list of how Barack Obama embraced the policies of George Bush and went even further. So on the bailouts for Wall Street, $700 billion under George Bush, but $4.5 trillion in dollars dispersed under Barack Obama, plus another $16 trillion in free interest loans. Or look at the offshoring of our jobs and the undermining of our wages with these free trade agreements. It was Bill Clinton, as you may remember, who actually signed the first free trade agreement, NAFTA, that began to ship millions of our jobs overseas. So while Mitt Romney might be making those investments with Bain Capital and establishing a whole investment prototype and investing his own money, it's actually that framework of these free trade agreements that allow the Republicans to do that in the first place. And that was brought to us by the Democrats. Exactly. And Barack Obama has expanded those free trade agreements and is now negotiating the mother of all free trade agreements, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which you've probably heard about. Yeah? Yeah, so again, this is something that we need to stop and point out to our friends is going on now under the watch, not just under the watch, but due to the active pushing by this president to expand those free trade agreements. And this one not only sends our jobs overseas and undermines wages, it also undermines American sovereignty by creating an international secret corporate board that gets to rule on our laws and our regulations if we want to protect workers' rights or adequate wages or safety in the workplace or our environment and our climate. It has to pass muster with this international corporate board or we pay them for future earnings lost. So this is an absolute outrage and should be a public issue. We are making it a public issue, which is why they are doing their darndest to keep us out of the debates. But we're fighting back, as you know. And on Monday night, for the third debate, we will be hosting, or I should say Democracy Now! Will be hosting an expanded debate. So tune in Monday night if you miss it to hear Kashana's debate, which is also important. You can get the Democracy Now! Debate on their station taped. So you can actually go to both of the debates and you can support a real debate here in Seattle, and you can support a real debate at the national level. You can also go to our website and sign on to the petition to occupy the Commission on Presidential Debates so that we can demand real debates that we deserve. So just to continue going through this litany quickly, so you're armed to have this discussion with your abused friends. In addition to the free trade agreements, you have the skyrocketing of student debt. Romney and Obama had identical positions on student debt. They were going to be heroes. They consider themselves heroes for staying the course on this devastating student debt. They promised not to let the interest rates go up, but that's not good enough. It's a sinking ship. And we're saying it's time to put an end to student debt. Instead of bailing out the banks for the 4th time, which the Fed is doing right now, we need to break up the big banks and bail out the students instead of the other way around, which is what they're doing. And while we're at it, it's time to make public higher education free, which is the way it should be. And we'll come back to that in a minute. But just to finish the laundry list here, in addition to skyrocketing debt, it's the home foreclosure epidemic, which this president decided to do nothing about. He said, too much moral hazard. The moral hazard was with Wall Street, not with the families who were victims of predatory loans to start with. We need an immediate moratorium on these home foreclosures, not one more family thrown out on the street. And, you know, talk about a peace president. On day 3 of his administration, the president intensified the bombing of Pakistan and then went on to surge the troops into Afghanistan, spread the drone wars into Yemen and Somalia. Now they're talking about North Africa as well. And the only reason that Obama brought the troops home from Iraq was why? It was thanks to George Bush, actually. It took George Bush to bring the troops home under Barack Obama because he had established a date to end the immunity of U.S. troops. And he fought as hard as he could to extend that date of immunity to keep the troops there. He wasn't able to do that thanks to Bradley Manning and WikiLeaks, who had basically exposed So I think it's fair to say that it was actually Bradley Manning and Julian Assange who brought the troops home from Iraq. And on civil liberties, this White House codified all the violations of George Bush and then went further to create the power of indefinite detention. These are dictatorial powers that have been given over to this president by Congress, and he was driving this as well. Dictatorial powers to lock up anyone of his choosing without due process, without charge, and without trial. Exactly. We've got to repeal that right of indefinite detention, and our administration will do that. And likewise, the power of assassination now, even including American citizens, the Patriot Act, Guantanamo, you name it. There are just so many essential civil liberties that are under assault, and we need to put an end to that. This is, again, a case in which the Democrats have delivered even more harm than was given to us by Republicans. Likewise, on immigrant rights, we've seen in the first 3 years of this administration more immigrants who were racially profiled, split from their families, children taken away from their parents, and deported under the Secure Communities Act. So the policy that the President Obama adopted recently, allowing the Dreamers to get 2-year work permits, that's very nice until they hit age 30 and they run into a brick wall. We're calling for immigrant rights as human rights ending NAFTA and the free trade agreements that actually drive the wave of economic refugees in the first place, but creating a welcoming and legal path to citizenship for the immigrants who are here. And then finally, just to mention quickly, the war on drugs, the failed and racist war on drugs. We need to put an end to that war on drugs and to treat abuse and addiction where they exist. They should be treated as public health and mental health problems, not treating them as crimes, which only makes them worse. And on day one of the new administration, a president, if she wanted, could actually instruct the Drug Enforcement Agency to do something really amazing and radical. That would be to use science in determining what substances are scheduled and where they are in the schedule of substances. Because that would mean that marijuana, which is a substance that is dangerous because it's illegal, it's not illegal because it's dangerous, which it's not at all, if you get what I mean. So that would mean that marijuana and hemp, if science was used, would be taken off the list of scheduled substances. And then finally, I have to mention the climate, because here again is a case where the Obama administration has adopted the policies of George Bush, and it's basically been a matter of drill, baby, drill, and then much more, including the thumbs up for more offshore oil, for opening up our national parks to fossil fuel exploration, to more mountaintop removal, giving the thumbs up to fracking, and to more coal, and to the southern tier of the Keystone Pipeline, which is laying the groundwork for the northern half. There's no doubt what's coming after this election. And then to actually the president going to Durban, South Africa, not him, he didn't go, it wasn't that important to him, but it was his representatives who went to Durban and said, no, we didn't need an international trade agreement, climate accord. Instead, we could wait until 2020, which is absolutely an outrage. We cannot wait till 2020. We cannot wait till 2016. It's time to stand up. It's time to stand up on the climate right now. And that's one of the reasons why it's not just okay to vote independent, to vote your values and not your fears, to vote green in this election. It's not just okay, it is life-saving, it is job-saving, and it is planet-saving. So that's the list to run through with your abused friends, to do that reality check and to help them wake up. And the reality is, in this race, that we not only have the right solutions, but that the Democrats and Republicans don't have a single exit strategy, not a one, to offer for the critical problems that we are facing, not one. So in this race, we have not only the facts on our side and justice on our side, and the solutions on our side, the real public interest solutions that are affordable, available, we can do them right now. But the amazing and exciting thing is that we actually have public opinion on our side. On every one of these issues, we have the public weighing in on poll after poll in large majorities that they support the agenda that is our agenda, that is voting green. And remember this, there are 36 million students and recent graduates who are indentured servants who do not have a future because of this incredible, outrageous debt, specially customized for students, lacking all of the consumer protections that are present in all other kinds of debt. So you've got students who've really been targeted and victimized as the latest cash cow for a predatory economy and predatory politicians, Democrats and Republicans, who've delivered this debt to a generation. And the students are facing not only debt, but also incredible unemployment rates of 50% unemployment and underemployment, and facing the climate crisis, which is coming down full bore on their shoulders, that Democrats and Republicans won't even mention the name of and compete. If you heard that outrageous discussion the other night, they are competing. They're in a pissing contest, basically, to see who can deliver more for the fossil fuels. So students are facing that future. This is like the future being faced by the young people in Tahrir Square and in Tunisia. And I think they have charted the course for our generation, our younger generation here as well. And that course is to basically stand up and to say, enough, we are going to take our future back. Because if young people do that, if that word gets out, and if it goes viral among 36 million students who are better positioned to go viral than anyone else in this country, if that word gets out and students come out, remember, 36 million votes in an election that expects 90 million voters could actually win the race in a three-way race. And speaking of students, let me just tell you quickly, when this campaign began, actually before it began, I was called on the phone by a young woman in Western Illinois University, and she said, you've got to come out here. We're having a mock election. We did this 4 years ago. It happens every 4 years here in the Midwest. The press pays attention, remember this, because it predicts the outcome of the election. And we're having conventions, 5 of them, including Tea Party and Green and Libertarian and the 2 big parties. We're having an electoral college. We're having a general election night. I'm your campaign manager, and you need to come. So I said, yes, ma'am, that's what our campaign is for. We are here to give you a voice above all. So I went out, I had 6 minutes to explain why students at this college that had never voted Green, Left, Independent, or environmental, why they should vote Green and vote for us in this election. And in the course of 6 minutes, and I ran through the agenda very quickly, we went from 3% in the polls to 27% in the polls. It took 6 minutes. And at first, I was totally blown away. We were hoping maybe we would get to 10 or 15%. I was totally flabbergasted by that. And at first I thought, well, that's just this school. That's just this particular place. It must have been a fluke. But basically, every campaign event after that was the same thing. That when we could get to the microphone, and in fact, we were being invited to the microphone at places where we had always been told, well, thanks for coming to our rally, but we can't let you speak because you're a Green. This was like totally different. I thought this race would be the most bitter, divisive, kind of OU persona non grata third-party candidate. I thought it would be more of that than any election I've ever been a part of. And it's actually been exactly the opposite. It's been like giving out candy at Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa all combined. Because there's been a political earthquake, a silent earthquake. It's partly a demographic shift, but it's also an economic shift. because 1 out of every 2 Americans is now in poverty or low income and heading for poverty. And as I mentioned, the predatory politicians do not have a single exit strategy in mind. So we have an incredible opportunity right now to really turn politics on its head. And just quickly, so I don't leave things out, I want to run through that agenda so you're clear what it is. The key solutions that we are offering, it includes the Green New Deal, which is, again, what Americans are clamoring for, which is jobs, not tax breaks, jobs. And we know how to create jobs. During the Great Depression, we had a New Deal, which is what the Green New Deal is modeled on. And in the New Deal, we actually created 4 million jobs in the first 2 months. We can do this, and we know how. And the Green New Deal, we would not only create 25 million jobs for about the cost of the first stimulus package, which created 2 to 3 million. Why so many more? Because we would directly create jobs, not give tax breaks, which is what the Obama plans have been. Tax breaks don't create jobs. So we'd get many more jobs, put an end to unemployment, and jumpstart the green economy for the 21st century at the same time. And that includes and that means putting a halt to climate change and making wars for oil obsolete. And then very quickly, we're also calling for Medicare for all, healthcare as a human right. It not only covers everyone comprehensively, it puts you back in the driver's seat of making your healthcare decisions with your provider, not from some profiteering CEO, and it saves us trillions of dollars over the coming decade. It is the alternative to austerity. I mentioned ending student debt. Right now, they're bailing out Wall Street again to the tune of $40 billion a month. Let's do that quantitative easing, but let's do it for something that's real, not for just this fake debt, which is absolutely useless from the banks. We should not be buying up more of the banks' bad debt. They built it. They built it. They can own it. Instead, we can make good use of those dollars by bailing out the students and making public higher education free. It pays for itself. We know that from the GI Bill. Every dollar we invested gave us $7 back in economic benefits for the economy. It's not only the right thing, it is absolutely the practical and responsible thing to do, and we should do it. In addition to downsizing the military, cut back to year 2000 levels, we are not twice as secure for having doubled the size of the military. By no means. We will be far more secure to be bringing our troops back from the bases, back from the wars we don't need, over 1,000 bases in over 140 countries around the world, ending the drone wars, bringing our troops and our war dollars home to build true security here at home with jobs and health care and a green economy. Finally, because I'm just about out of time, we are at this tipping point moment. There are 90 million voters who are voting with their feet by not coming out to this election. 1 out of every 2 eligible voters is staying home because they know that neither Barack Obama nor Mitt Romney represent them. What we need to do is get the word out. And there are all kinds of ways that we can do that. And remember, whether we win the office, and if we do that, we can turn the White House into a greenhouse, and the world will be a better place. But even short of winning the office, we can win the day. Every vote for our campaign is an irrepressible call for the solutions that the American people are demanding right now, and we advance them with every vote that comes in for our campaign. Every vote is a win for the future we deserve. So, by getting on the internet, by going to our website, jillstein.org, by going to Facebook, by going to Twitter, and helping this campaign go viral to students, to the unemployed, to people of color, to the disabled, to all of the people, to middle-class Americans who are dropping down and joining the ranks of the impoverished, to young people who are inheriting this climate crisis full bore. We can get the word out. There are so many people who would stand up and vote green in this election if we can get the word out. And you can help do that. Another way you can help do that is by contributing to this campaign. Thanks to you, we made matching funds in the primary. That was made history together. And we made it on the ballot thanks to you for 85% of voters in this election. If we can raise as much money in the final part of this race as we did in the primary, we have the real potential to hire on the staff and to do the advertising. We have this very simple TV and internet ad that was like really bare bones simple, but you wouldn't have believed how it was bringing people in to the campaign. It was just astounding. We can get that ad up and running again if we can raise enough money to do it. And the deal is, if we can raise another $500,000, which is what we did in the first part, if we can do that in this general section of the election, if we can raise $500,000, we stand to be able to reach the 5% level, possibly more, but if we get to 5%, it's a magic number. At 5%, we are on the ballot for the next 4 years. And that means that we hit the ground running starting on November 7th for our upcoming local and legislative races. It means we hit the ground running when we begin our next presidential race. In this campaign, we spent 80% of the campaign just getting on the ballot. And only in the last couple weeks could we begin a real campaign. Nonetheless, we came up from undetectable to 1% to 2%. That is millions of voters even before we began to get the word out. So if we have an adequately funded and staffed campaign, we think we can double that from 2% to 4%, get up a little higher to 5%, where not only are we on the ballot then for at least the next 4 years, it also means that we get a $20 million grant from the federal government when we start the next presidential race. So this is our moment. This is what so many of us have spent our lifetimes laying the groundwork for. And I don't know about you, but I certainly never thought that I would see this kind of political tipping point happen in my lifetime. And it's only going to get bigger because the establishment parties do not have solutions. We're going to keep facing the problems that we face. They are going to keep growing because the politics as usual is not going to fix it. So we are laying the groundwork now for a campaign and a movement that will continue growing. There is that social movement on the ground and the work that so many of you are doing to push us forward on all those fronts. And that social movement deserves a political voice. That is what we're building. In the words of Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. We are bringing that demand into the political universe. And to quote another favorite guru of mine, Alice Walker, who says quite simply that we are the ones we've been waiting for. Let's turn this breaking point Let's turn this breaking point we face into the tipping point we need, and let's take back our democracy and the peaceful, just, green future we deserve. Thank you all so much for making it happen.
So I've got about 7 of your questions here in my hand, and we have a half an hour to do this. I'm really hoping we can get through all of them. And we did it, just to let you know, we did these cards as a way to sort of make sure we don't have repeat questions and to try and hit a lot of the topics that are the most popular. So here we go. Jill, your first question is about women.
Oh. Okay. What about them? All right. So, yeah, no, there's a lot of, I think, disinformation about how the Democrats are going to, make everything fine for women. But in fact, if you look at what Obama is offering, it's pretty much more of the same. And women have really been, in the crosshairs of this economic unraveling. So 40% of women-headed households are in poverty. Women are being paid at like 75% of what men are paid for equal work. Women are the victims of the minimum wage jobs where the pay has not been raised. Many women are working in the tipped professions that are not even subject to minimum wage. They get the sub-minimum wage, like for subhumans, you'd think. They're getting $2.13 an hour, and that hasn't been raised. And the Obama administration's failure to stand up for working people, to stand up to raise the minimum wage and the tipped minimum wage, and the failure to stand up for the Employee Free Choice Act and to support unionization and to support the right to form workers, all of these critically impact women. The failure to stand up for Medicare for all, for a single-payer system, which the president took off the table, has huge impacts for women and women's health. Specifically, the president took Plan B, the morning after pill, off the shelf. It had been approved by the FDA, approved by 60 medical organizations and public health organizations, and this president took it off and makes a lot out of the difference between him and Romney, that the Republicans are going to deny women victims of rape and incest abortions, which is a terrible thing. On the other hand, it's also a terrible thing that millions of poor women have been denied access to abortion for decades under Democratic administrations as well, with this Hyde Amendment that passed in like the 70s, denying women on Medicaid access to an abortion as well. So I'd say, there's a lot of disinformation about how Obama would help women. Women have not been helped, and it's important to separate the talk, the warm and fuzzy talk that we hear, from the actual walk. And in fact, women have not done well under the Obama administration any more than under Republicans. Thank you.
So the next question comes from Eliza, who is 10 years old. And she says, what is it like being in jail for 8 hours and being arrested?
So I'll just say quickly, it's not fun to be arrested. And all kinds of people are being arrested nowadays just for standing up for their First Amendment rights. I've gone to jail twice during this campaign. The first time was at a protest of evictions by Fannie Mae for 2 families who had been victims of predatory loans. And my running mate, Sherry Honkala, and I went to jail, and we were processed for about 24 hours. It took them to process us, and that was the most eye-opening experience of all, to be in a tiny jail cell meant for one person, we were 3 and 4 packed into these tiny jail cells for 24 hours. And a jail cell, if you haven't ever been to jail before, is like the stall in a women's bathroom. It's basically a big, it's basically a big stall around a toilet with a metal bench where one person could lie down. And there were 3 of us that were packed into this little stall in freezing cold weather and in freezing cold temperature, which they kept it cold on purpose. So it was extremely punitive and very difficult. I basically stood up all night because there was no place to lie down unless you wanted to lie down on this filthy floor in front of the toilet. It's extremely dehumanizing. If dogs were treated that way, people would be put in prison for animal cruelty. So we got a lot to do to clean up our prisons and to make sure that we're not throwing people into prison for simply standing up for their rights of free speech. And then when I went to the Commission on Presidential Debates to protest, to say that we deserved a full debate, and was arrested, again with Sherry, we were actually handcuffed in tight plastic restraints and then cuffed to metal chairs where we sat for 8 hours. There were 2 of us for most of that time under the watch of 16 police. There were all of 2 of us in this detention center, and they couldn't bear to uncuff us from the chairs, as if the 2 of us mighty grandmothers would overwhelm the 16 police that were sitting around and watching us. So these are our Homeland Security dollars at hard work here. And I should just mention that they were especially upset because our team, Kate and one other assistant, had been able to track us down. Even though we were at a dark site, we were at a national security special detention center that no one was able to find out about, they were able to find out about. Our intelligence trumped their intelligence. And that made them madder than anything. And in fact, they then told our support staff, which showed up at this secret black site, they told them that they would arrest them. First, they demanded to know, how did they find out about this secret site? And they said, well, we just talked to people, No fancy computer or spy systems, we just talked to people. And they had made a lot of phone calls to all the different police precincts and began to piece together little bits and pieces of information and talk to other people, including the EMTs, who sort of know where everything is, and had put it together. But they were really, really pissed and said to them that if they stayed on site, because they showed up early, if they stayed on site, that they would be arrested for just being outside on the public sidewalk near this secret detention center. So, it just goes to show what a little bit of human intelligence can do to trump this national security intelligence. So, thank you. Next one.
Okay, food and nutrition are suspiciously absent from the healthcare debate. How would you include them in a national healthcare program?
Don't get me going on that one. But yes, we've made food and agriculture a key part of the Green New Deal so that we can transition our food economy, which is currently a very toxic kind of food. It's this industrial, GMO, highly processed, calorie-dense, nutrition-free pseudo food that is being, subsidized and made cheap. Meanwhile, food deserts are being created, especially in low-income communities. And this has everything to do with these public health epidemics that we're fighting. And in fact, we're going bankrupt with not a healthcare system, but really a sick care system, which is spending over $2 trillion a year. If you add up private and public expenses on healthcare, it's about $2 trillion a year being spent treating chronic diseases that are preventable at a tiny fraction of the cost. So it's one of the benefits of the Green New Deal in that it would shift subsidies over to small farmers and organic farmers in particular, sustainable food systems. We're calling for sustainable small farmers and community farms and CSAs, community-supported agriculture, and farmers markets, and all those enterprises that create healthy, sustainable, nutritious local food, which is also really essential for eliminating greenhouse gases. Food is a big source, and industrialized food production is a big source. And we can go so far to create a real healthcare system by providing healthy, sustainable food. And just one quick case in point, when Cuba's oil pipeline went down in the 1990s with the collapse of the Soviet Union, overnight, Cuba had to green their food system and green their energy system and their transportation system. It was like a Green New Deal overnight, which they had to do. And what do you think happened to their health statistics in the middle of this economic devastation? And their GDP is crashing, and they can't export anything. They don't have their usual imports. They don't have any oil and their usual energy. So what happens when people had to start eating right, and they had to start biking and walking to get places, and they didn't have pollution from the fossil fuels to poison them? Overnight, practically, their health statistics had a revolution that we cannot buy with $2 trillion a year. Their obesity rates went down 50%. Their death rates from diabetes went down 50%. Their death rates from heart disease and stroke went down 20 to 35%. It was an incredible health revolution, and it really points to exactly what that question was talking about, that a healthy food system is really critical, not just for the climate, not just for the jobs in our communities, but fundamentally for our health as well. Thank you.
Next question. What are your views on the Federal Reserve banking system? Should it be eliminated?
Well, there's no doubt the Fed as we know it should be eliminated. There is a role for an institution that serves the public, not the private banks. And the Fed currently serves the private banks. But we do need an institution to create monetary policy and to oversee that side of the economy, but in a way that's transparent, in a way that serves ordinary working people and not the banks. So we basically do need to go back to the drawing boards on the Fed and make it right. Thank you.
I don't know how much time we have left. Is anybody, Jody, out there? 10 minutes? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, and Jody gets the last 3. All right, in that case, how about this? This is a frequently asked question that perhaps you don't hear that much about. If you were president, would you try and lessen the billions we give to Israel each year and actually call them out for the government acts of inhumanity against the Palestinians?
Yes. And simply put, when we're in the White House, we will put Israel on notice, as well as Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, and essentially all the countries who either are our partners or aren't our partners, to say that our foreign policy will no longer depend on allies for oil, that it will no longer depend on procuring scarce resources, that our foreign policy will be based on international law and human rights, and that any support from the U.S. government will be contingent on on compliance with international law and human rights. And that means an end to apartheid, an end to illegal occupations and illegal settlements, and so on, so that we will expect the Israeli government to serve all Israelis and to build on the work being done right now on the ground by the peace and human rights groups, Palestinians and the Israeli peace movement, that are really working to build trust, to build community, and to actually create peace and justice on the ground that should be the model for how the Israeli government moves forward. Thank you.
Finally, I'm going to combine a couple of these questions because I think this is a great way to wrap up. So I'll read them both. How can we best use the awesome energy generated from your campaign to help elect Greens locally? And will you come to Seattle next year to help us elect local Greens in 2014? But also, what are the key things we can do to help other than joining the Green Party and donating money? So where should we go from here, Jill?
Great. Okay. All right. Wonderful. Great questions. And, you know, I certainly did not get into this campaign in order to do something up until November 7th, you know, and then stop. After 15 years, really, as an activist for public health, for a healthcare system that would actually serve people, for an environment that could protect our health instead of destroy our health. You know, that's how I sort of got into all of this, and I worked as an activist for about 15 years until I realized that working on single issues is exactly where they want you to be, so that we will be divided and conquered. And at that point I realized that that's what a political party is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be how we get to critical mass around an agenda for peace, justice, democracy, and sustainability. At that point, I joined the Green Party, and I actually began to run for office. It was back in 2002. And, you know, everything has just sort of proceeded from there. And for me, this is very much a part of building the Green Party as the means of hitting that tipping point and moving past that tipping point to actually challenging power and taking power so that we can do all the things that we work so hard to do on the ground. So I really encourage people, you know, to join a Green Party local, to become a member of the state party, and to be active in that. You know, and you can be active doing the work that you're doing, because we run elections, but we also help to build the movement on the ground, which the elections represent. So whatever it is that you're working on, you can bring that expertise into the party and help build that issue while you're building the broad coalition. We'll be having a discussion after this race, whether we're in the White House or we're not yet in the White House. We'll be having a broader discussion about where we go next, but I think one of the things we'll be focusing on is municipal elections and trying to help candidates and local parties break into their city councils or break up where they're already in city councils to move on up to the level of mayors. We do have some mayors around the country. It'd be great to be seeing some more and a bigger presence on our city councils. So that's as essential. It's just as life-changing to keep building that social movement and the political voice that represents it. And the Green Party gives us a platform to do that. It's like the saying from 17th century sailor lore. You need one hand for the ship and one hand for yourself. So keep working on exactly what you're working on, but also consider joining the party as a way to make all of our movements stronger and get to critical mass, because the clock is ticking. We don't have time to spare. Every moment counts, and we need to keep the heat on there is a big election, you know, in the big universe out there, and it's really important that we win this race for democracy, for justice, and for sustainability. We can make it happen together. Thank you all so much for making it so.